Hey, all, Andy here. Happy Thursday, helping you build a career you love. Great to see ya. Great to see you all. Got a special treat today. Not that every Thursday isn't special, but this is just a different kind of special. So get comfortable, get in the chat, say hi. Let me know where you're watching from. If you've been with me for a while and intend on staying with me through the long haul of your career, great to have you. And if you're just passing through, that's fine too. We always love anybody that we can help. So today I got a special treat. For those of you on my email list, you probably saw the memo. Jim Vaselopulos, who is a longtime friend of mine, truly a friend. We met when I had a different life. We stayed together. He's now a best-selling author of the book Clarity. It's all about working less and achieving more, something I know nothing about. So I'm glad he's here to help educate us. He's in the green room probably laughing at me right now. But get in the chat, say hi, put some question marks. We are going to do a Q&A with him. You can ask your questions along the way. Much of today's show is going to be about me asking him about some particular points in the book, some of my favorite lessons that he shared. He said he would happily lend his voice and give you, his viewpoint. And I think you can learn a lot about how to go through your career. So I just want to let you know, he is a great guy, founder of Rafti Advisors. He does executive coaching for businesses and senior executives. He also is the co-founder of the Leadership Podcast, which I absolutely love. Lots of prominent individuals, much more famous than I am, are on there, although I did somehow squeak onto one of those episodes. And so, like I said, his book just came out in the last couple of weeks. So can we give him a warm welcome and say hey to him? I'm going to add him here to the screen and just give him a huge, huge chat. And as you guys are saying hey to him, I always love to say hello to you because I think your attention is the greatest thing you can give any of us. So Gene, hey, Julie, what's up? Michael Moore. Michelle Lee, how you doing? Mark, what's up? Cynthia, Sebastian, John, Peter, DRD, Mark M, Ramon, Tori, and can everybody give Kara a shout too? But let's say hey to Jim. I want to kick him off. He can introduce himself. Let me give him something to share with us, which is I want to know what his inspiration was for the book. So if you're not familiar, Kara can drop the book in the chat. You can get it on Amazon. But Jim, welcome aboard. Thanks for doing this. I love you, man. Say hey to the folks and tell us who you are and what inspired you to sit down every day and write the dang thing.
Well, first off, thank you for having me on the show. You're a good friend, Dan, and I'm just so honored to be invited into your community. And thank you to the community for kind of welcoming me. This is just, you really know the kind of impact that you've got on the world when you see the kind of following you've got. And I will tell you, it's just the following you've got, Andy, is amazing. And, so I'm just thrilled to be here. It's funny because the inspiration for the book, in many ways, I've always kind of knew I wanted to write a book. But one of the inspirations was my muse, Andy LaCivita. Okay. So I think a number of years ago, we were talking over coffee or lunch or something like that. And I think we talked about turning one of your books that you wrote. And so you always inspired me to say like, hey, you should write a book. And people gave me different ideas on what book to write, but I knew I'd write one. But I wanted to write the one that was unique to me, the one that wasn't like, here's a retread of other ideas that other people have written about. I wanted to write the book that was unique to the value I offer to my clients and what I do in the marketplace. And it took a while to suss out kind of the topic and everything. And I had the help of a lot of wonderful people along the way. But probably none more than you, Andy, to try and get this like focused and lasered in on, the stuff that I really do.
Well, I appreciate that. And I know, there's a lot of, and I don't think people really get this. There's a lot of pressure, when we think about, putting in the work, that's one thing. But when you're anticipating how it's going to be received, that's another. And I know for me, and I know when Jim and I talked, and I always tell you folks this too, you got to enjoy the journey because everything that you do, writing a book is really, really hard and it's really, really lonely. And one of the things I told him, and I hope you all remember this, and I hope he experiences it, is that you can never see what your work is going to mean while you're doing it, right? That like when you're writing the book, you have no idea. And I said to him, you're going to get this book, but when you the joy isn't in the writing of the book. It's in what happens to the people's lives who benefit from it. And one of the things I want to cue you up here with a question. I'm big on stories. The people that follow me know that. Obviously, it's the best analogy that you can, to illustrate your points. And you are a master storyteller. And by the way, Jim is a salesperson by trade, but among other things. So he understands this, but he's really channeled a lot of stories into the book. And I love the stories. There's story after story, but there's an undertone of stories and messages throughout. How, tell us about that. How did you use the story structure? The benefit of using the stories, maybe how about your favorite story? I know there was I don't know which one was my favorite. Which one was your favorite? So just really storytelling and your favorite story from the book.
Yeah. I mean, it's so important. And, one of the things is, you realize, especially in sales, is like stories hit home. Stories are what really get people to be not just like intellectually engaged, but like emotionally engaged. And emotional engagement is important in sales. And, when you think about it, there are stories that we remember from our childhood. There's a reason why we're still telling Aesop's fables. There's a reason why we still talk about Greek mythology. It's because they're powerful stories and they have embedded lessons within them that make them really powerful. And if I go back and I think about what I heard in all the years we've been doing the leadership podcast, what I hear from people when they're talking about like, hey, I love this episode, but I love this story. I love this part of that episode. And no one ever says like, hey, the intellectual concept of like accountability really resonated with me. It's always like, oh my gosh, I love that story they told about the Bacon Wars. I love the story they told about blank. And so the reality is stories are what stick with us. And if I'm talking about, let's say, all these business concepts, I could write a textbook, but, I've had to read a lot of these books as, co-host of leadership podcasts. So you read these books and you're like, I read it because I want to honor the guests that we have and I want to go through and I want to interview them properly. But, some books are easier to get through than others. The ones that are easier to get through are the ones that have great stories. And so I pretty much committed myself to, writing in story format. But originally it was going to be like case studies because there's a professor, James Schrager, who's at University of Chicago, great guy, has been good to me, good mentor. And, he was like, hey, you should write this as a bunch of case studies. And I know that's a popular format for books, but I was like, no, I want to write rich stories. And so I ended up writing these fictional stories. And they, they follow an arc that I wanted people to be able to identify with, to say, oh my gosh. And the early feedback from the book has been like, people, when they talk about concepts in the book, they're always like, oh my gosh, I loved it when Diana did this. And Diana is one of the characters in the story. So I know like the format works. At the same time, there are all kinds of like really personal stories that I've embedded in here. Most of them are self-deprecating. Most of them really are, kind of poking fun at me. So, enjoy that. I know there are a few, at least from the University of Illinois, that I'm sure gave Andy a chuckle. But yeah, no doubt. The most, and I've got way more. They're just not fit for print. But I think the story that I think sets it off and is really powerful and resonates with me deeply is a story about my father. I was probably not far into my career, maybe, 5 years or so, less, more. I'm not sure. I can't remember. And he was an immigrant, came to this country, without a lot of money in his pocket, started a business, super stressful, trying to make it in this country without a whole lot of, backing, good times, bad times. But I mean, we're talking about like not years that we've had like that are flush now. There were lots of recessions, 70s, 60s, stuff like that, tough times. Mm-hmm. And so this guy started business, did well with his brother, super stressful, had a history of ulcers. And I'm sure it was because of that. And so he had this routine where he'd, his ulcers would flare up. He'd go to the doctor. They'd give him a bunch of antacid. And like we had boxes of this antacid in the house. I mean, like huge boxes all the time. He drank it like probably too much. And so he was having another flare up and he went into the doctor's office and, probably expecting just to get a renewal of a prescription, to get some more antacid and be on his way. And so he went into the doctor's office, and, the cute older couple that my parents were, they both went together. And the doctor, listened to his symptoms and, said, oh, yeah, probably sounds like this. He's expecting a renewal of his prescription. But then the doctor says, well, hey, lay down on the table. Let's just examine you. Let's just not take it as a default that this is what the problem is. She starts doing that thing where, you poke down in someone's abdomen and you kind of feel for stuff, which, I have no idea if that was even like a thing or if they're just trying to make you uncomfortable or giggle. But, she does that, and then she steps back from the table and has my dad sit up and my mom sitting in the chair over there. And she goes, Mr. Vaselopulos, you're not experiencing an ulcer. Good news. Bad news is I suspect you have what is called a AAA, which is an abdominal aortic aneurysm, and it's rather large. I can feel it. It is very likely that you're going to the hospital today. You will probably be in surgery later today, and you need to prepare yourself and your family for that. So, I'm sending you right to the hospital right now. My parents are like, what? This can't be the case. And the reality is she said to him, I said, like, your aorta bursts. You could be on the front steps of the hospital. They will not be able to save you. You need to go to the hospital now. And so went to the hospital, had the surgery, the recovery, everything else, saved his life. And the reality is he wouldn't have met my wife, my kids, any of those things. We wouldn't have had him for, 30, 40 years more that we had him for. So, what a blessing. But the power of the story comes in the fact that if this doctor, Dr. Susan Nelson, I call her out by name, she's a wonderful lady. If she hadn't been like a little bit curious and hadn't just fallen into that kind of easy pattern you can fall into, which is like, it's the same thing. Go take some aspirin, call me in the morning, just kind of saying like, hey, let's see what happens. No, she's like, let me just confirm my assumptions. Or disconfirm them. Let me really dig in and ask the question that I'm supposed to ask, not just take it for granted that, this guy knows his symptoms, and really do her job. Which if you take a look at the workplace, we do this stuff all the time. We're like, it's got to be this, just let it go. And the reality is she did her job well because she had high standards, but she really understood deeply, like little tiny things in his narrative that didn't add up. So she was like curious, and she says, let's dig a little deeper. Let's make sure we push on that abdomen. And she saved his life. Well, that metaphor sticks true to me to this day, because that's what I see go wrong in so many businesses that are kind of dealing with problems that are, just don't seem to go away. It's like, are you asking that next question? Are you really questioning your assumptions? Are you digging to that next level? And that's really why that story is, I think, a powerful way to kind of kick off the book.
Wait, I love that. The curiosity component, because, I always, and this is a great segue to something I wanted to ask you about problems in general, because I think people make a lot of assumptions. They're not curious enough. And the people that follow me a lot know I say this a lot. What I'm about to say is, problems don't bother me. Randomness bothers me. And because I say, a lot of these folks are job searchers or people that want to develop their career, but they're doing things in the job search aspect where they don't do it very often. And they see something that occurs and they think, oh, well, I must be wrong, or this is the way I need to job search, and no one ever's going to respond, or wow, everybody responds. I say these are random events, and you think they're patterns. And you in the book you talk about, you use analogies between for businesses about business symptoms and medical systems or medical symptoms, and you talk about business symptoms versus the actual problems. And that's what I'm a big data guy. I'm always looking for insight to help people with how to determine, is that actually a pattern? Is that actually a problem? How could you overcome it? I'd love to get your take on, the analogy between business symptoms, actual problems, and how the audience can benefit from, it's not just that curiosity, but how they go through their career, because I think a lot of people fall victim to this because, number one, they're not curious enough. Number two, they might be doing something that they're not as experienced at. Can you talk about that? That was a great lesson in the book.
Yeah. And thank you. And what I'd say is, what's really interesting about, like, let's say guys like us, we're not saying anything that's dramatically different than what a lot of other people are saying. And in many cases, what I'm saying is like people were saying this, like Plato and Socrates and Epictetus said this stuff like 3,000 years ago. So the reality is there's, sometimes things aren't new, but the way you package them is really important, because you got to have to package them in a way that people find meaningful and they can apply and it's useful. And so I think that's, Andy, one of the things you do tremendously well is you just package information in a way that people go like, the way you say it, it makes sense to me. And that's, relevant and powerful. And I think that's, what I'm always been trying to do, not only in the book, but in my business. And one of the things that people always used to kind of say about me, they're like, hey, Jim, you always come up with these great analogies. And so when we talk about symptoms, I think it's a great way to say like, hey, there are a lot of business symptoms out there, but let's compare them to medical symptoms so that with that analogy, you can kind of see like, I get it now. Okay. This makes more sense to me. And so I'm not going to talk about all of them, but what I'd say all the symptoms have in common is, and we often look at them as problems, but the reason why they're not problems is because they are outcomes. Okay. So let's take a look at, let's say, profitability. When I talk about profitability, I compare it to fatigue. And the reason why I compare it to fatigue, because profitability, can be good or bad, and we can have problems, but we tend to get into problems with profitability as a symptom of greater problems, but on the edges, much like fatigue. So if you got someone who's like really unfit, they get fatigued really easy. So it's like an unhealthy business gets fatigued really easy. But then sometimes you've got a business that is like super fit and, super nuts, but they're pushing the candle. They're burning the candle. They're burning it so hot that they run into problems on the high end. So, my business is super heated and I have profitability issues because I'm just fatigued at the high end of the spectrum. And so it really tracks well with the symptom of fatigue. So you can understand it's not just, I only have profitability issues when things are bad. And so that is a way to kind of understand a problem, much like I talk about culture as a symptom. Because profitability is an outcome I can measure. Culture is something you can say, hey, I have a good culture, a bad culture, but I can't really say like, let's fix culture. Culture is more like your immune system, because your immune system is a reflection of all the healthy habits you've got. Okay. Do I eat well? Do I exercise well? Do I do all the things to have a healthy immune system? I can't replace my immune system. I mean, maybe we can get on the edge case scenarios where people are suffering from blood cancers and things like that. But the reality is you can't just replace it. You can influence it. I might be able to take an antibiotic to boost it or to, influence it. I might be able to take some medicine, but the reality is I just need to get healthy again. My immune system needs to build itself up. Well, in business, your culture, I can come up with all kinds of great platitudes like, hey, this is the most important thing in our business. But your business's culture is a reflection of the decisions you make every day. Where do you spend your time? Where do you spend your money? And when push comes to shove, do you really say quality is job one? Or do you really say the customer is always right? All these little things, they're a reflection. These decisions are a reflection of the culture, and your culture gets created from those. And that's why it's a lot like your immune system. So when we take a look at symptoms that are outcomes, so many times we treat them as the problem, like you've got a culture problem or you've got a profitability problem, but really your problem is really something else. We just need to see that this is a symptom. My stomach hurts. Okay. I've got indigestion, but the problem is you have either an ulcer or you might have a AAA. And so we need to address the real problem. And so the symptoms are distractions.
Wait, I want to stay on the subject because, I get the analogy. So now you're my audience, and you're much of the time, you don't have total control of operating the business, right? When when you are coaching somebody, usually you're coaching the CEO or some very, very senior person in the organization who can push things down if they needed to make changes. Now I've got a lot of people who are managers, even vice presidents or directors, and maybe somebody who's just starting out. What's a simple, I always talk to people like I say, you cannot change your thoughts by thinking differently. You need to change your thoughts by doing differently. But the first way to do that is you have to intercept your thoughts. So what a lot of people do that I coach, and I'm guessing a lot of the folks on the podcast are thinking the same thing, is, okay, that's great, but what's kind of the first thing I can think of to say, is this the problem, or is this just a symptom? Because we need to, if we're going to fix this, we need to fix it, I don't know, over there, right? Not here, right? You don't fix a culture by just firing one person. You don't fix a culture by giving somebody a bonus, right? Kind of thing. Is there something just very simple, very almost immediate that these folks can put into play to help them say, wait a minute, I know we got to ask the question, is this the real problem? But is there something that they can do or think or a step they can take to try to get them going in the right direction to troubleshoot this stuff?
Great question. And the answer is a question. It's almost always why.
Yeah.
Okay. It's just like, okay, why do we have a culture problem? Or why is this happening? Or why, you don't even have to ask it at that really high level, like, why is there a culture problem? Because once you understand the culture is a series of decisions that are made that bubble up to create a culture, you say, like, why wasn't the customer number one in this case? Why did we defer and not make quality our number one thing? And, you kind of understand things. So it's like, ask that question, like, why is it that, when you take the antacid you've been taking, it's not quieting down your ulcer? Okay. So it's like these little tiny questions, like, the antacid hasn't been helping. No, it hasn't. Maybe I just need more, or a different one. It's like, maybe that's not the problem. So it's asking why is such a great question. And a lot of times all it takes is like a series of whys. Like, someone will give you an answer and it might lead you to another symptom, because a lot of symptoms go hand in hand, like fever and chills, but then you ask another question, you go a level deeper, and usually within, what we call is like 5 whys, you can get down to what really matters. So I really think being curious and asking why, and, if something doesn't make sense, just like, innocently, especially if you're in the middle of the food chain in your company, a lot of times you can ask that innocent question. It says, like, hey, that's really interesting. Why did we decide to do this considering this? And someone will explain it, and they might give you a BS answer. But the reality is, if you ask another question, pretty soon they realize that it's a BS answer, and they're like, yeah, this is a problem. And so, and if all you are is the person that helps the other person surface the inconsistency, you don't have to call them out on it, but you just have to bring it to the surface. And then hopefully, people start paying attention to what needs to be done.
I love it. I think that is a perfect answer. I think it's the perfect step. And I always tell people, you talked about the symptoms. I say to people multiple things, like when they go through their career, they should keep a career achievements journal. People that follow me, they know what that is. And one of the things that's in there is, why did I do that? A year ago, Kara and we talk, and it's like, hang on, I gotta write down my variables, my parameters, my assumptions, the things I was thinking, because a year from now, I'm not going to remember it. But in the moment, I also need to say, why did I do this? What's happening? And I always tell people, keep a food diary, not a feelings diary. If you want to capture this stuff, don't ask yourself, why was I feeling this way? Write down, I was feeling this way. What was happening around me, right? I ate this. It made me feel that way. Wait, speaking of and this goes along with the self-awareness stuff that I wanted to talk to you about. In the book, you talk about cognitive limitations, about emotions, assumptions, and things we make. And I am all about this, because I think people make mistakes because they make assumptions. They're not curious enough. They think with limitations, like instead of abundance, actual limitations, but they're cognitive limitations. Can you talk about kind of the lessons you cite in the book related to this? Because I'm just huge on this. I just think it's a key to success.
Yeah, I mean, this is such an interesting topic of conversation. It's so interesting because what we want to talk about, because we're talking about clarity, right? Is the book I wrote is like, what are the things that cloud our ability to kind of see what's really there? And so the number one thing on most people's list is emotions. Our emotions cloud our judgment. They allow us to react instead of, respond with some, cognitive effort. And so, that's one I probably won't spend a lot of time talking on. I know you talk a lot about, but it's like our emotions can get the best of us, and we just have to recognize that they're important, fear is important. All these emotions are important, but if we let them govern our response, then they can be limiting. So we need to be mindful and just be aware of those. But there are other things that people aren't necessarily aware of. And a lot of times they're not aware of their assumptions. And so they're making assumptions and they might realize, I'm making this assumption, but they're making like 10 more they don't realize. And you got to just realize that like anytime someone says like, well, probably, most of the time, usually, anytime that those types of phrases are uttered, it's a guarantee that whatever is next is an assumption. Okay. So, getting good at recognizing those kinds of lead-ins to assumptions can make you pay closer attention to what's said next, because then you can ask that question is like, what data do we have that supports that? Or why do we believe that? Or, what is that consistent with this other statement that was made earlier? And so you just got to be mindful of not just, writing down your assumptions, but like hearing other people's assumptions and noticing them in meetings, being aware of that, because that can really provide a totally different landscape on the problem you're trying to solve. And I will tell you that I was not good at this, especially when I was in college, because I was, that was like a 90% of the engineering program is like, what are your assumptions? What are your knowns? What are your unknowns? And I was like, got that wrong so many times that, of course my grades suffered, but, I learned that lesson the hard way. And I realized that I learned it well enough that when I was in meetings, I was able to I became like the Winston Wolf of several companies I worked at, because they were like, hey, we got a problem client or we got a problem project, Jim, go fix it. And I was like, why are you good at it? And I'm like, I don't know. But I realized over time it was because I was good at noticing assumptions. And so I think that's one area that can cloud our judgment. That's really, really important. I always talk about pressure testing your assumptions, big section in the book. I would say there are a couple other ones that are really interesting. One's a little more humorous than the other one. And one is like math. Okay. Because most people I hate math. And, most people can't even do it too well in their head. But, when you're in any meeting, like people will start spewing out numbers. Most people are like, well, they did the math, so it must be right. But like in most meetings, like you can add the math up and you're like, that just doesn't add up. I was going through a guy's deck that he was presenting to a board meeting, a sales deck, and he was presenting all this stuff. And I'm like, dude, your numbers don't add up. It's like, really? I'm like, yeah, unless I'm missing something, like there's no way your numbers add up. And he's like, yeah, they don't add up. And I'm like, how'd that go over in the board meeting? He's like, it went over fine. I'm like, well, it shouldn't have. That should have been a huge red flag to like, no, this is a problem. So most people just let numbers go, and you need to be mindful. And we really don't always have the best sense with numbers. So, if you got a little time, I'll just play a little game. Like most of the time people say like, I can give you a little fact, and then, work with me on this one. 1 million seconds is 12 days. Just in your head, what do you think a billion seconds is? Most people are like, I don't know, month, whatever.
Oh no, it's got to be
32 years
or whatever. Okay,
32 years. Now, what's a trillion seconds? Okay. 32,000 years. People are like, what? 32,000 years. But the reality is, even this basic skill of number sense is something we don't often really have. We have less capability than we think. So math gets in the way a lot of times. You have to do the math. And you have to really hold people accountable to faulty math, which is something that happens all the time. But I think there's another interesting one that comes out that I like to talk about is context. Because a lot of times, we're saying, well, that never works. Well, that never works is a really bad statement, because it depends on the situation, the circumstances. It may work sometimes. It depends on a broader context. So what's the context we're dealing with? And one of the ways I like to kind of get people to kind of realize context and the kind of assumptions we make is, what do you imagine the best odds are in a casino? Okay. So a lot of people start putting out things like, well, I think the best odds are blackjack, or I think the best odds are, some other game, whatever, I don't know.
Yeah.
And
on a black or
roulette.
Yeah.
Black or red roulette, good odds, right? But the reality is that answer depends entirely on who you are. The most important question is, who am I? And if you're a player, those answers might be fine. What if you own the casino? Totally different answer. Your best odds are those slot machines. That's why they're the first thing you see and the last thing you see going through every entrance and exit. Mm-hmm. And so just having a simple answer like that and reframing it based on who I am gets you to understand the context is essential in evaluating any situation. And a lot of times we just gloss over that. And especially in our interpersonal relationships, like you were talking about earlier, Andy, like where we're going on a job hunt or a job search. And like we assume that everyone else has the same context we have. And I think one of the big things I've always talked about with people looking for jobs, and I know you probably talk about this as well, is when someone's interviewing you, okay, and that interview might have your name on it, 11 a.m., Jim Vaselopulos. And it's like, this interview is about me. This interview is 100% not about you, okay? It is about that position that company has that they need to fill. You just happen to be a person that is potential to fill that position, but it's not about you. It's about that job. And so that's the context you need to keep in your mind is how, and I know you talk about stuff like this, Andy, it was like, how can I add value to the company in this gap that they've got? How can I be the person that fills the gap? Not like, hey, this is, book report. Here's what I did over the summer. Let me tell you about me. It's like, no, how do you fill that gap that they've got? And so that's context that's really important that often takes us astray from where we want to be. So those are just a few of the ways that we can get really off base when we're looking at problems and let other factors cloud our ability to assess a situation properly.
I love that. Okay, wait. So I hope every one of my job seekers out there heard that, right? All these assumptions, right? How I spend week in and week out every Thursday trying to bust myths because those myths are based on assumptions that you have that is from the context in which you view what's actually happening at any moment in time. Right. And I say, no, you got to trust me on this. I have, X thousands of data points that say that's not the case. And I think, Jim, that was a beautifully, kind of crafted approach and just another way to give you to look at all these assumptions we make, not just when it comes to job searching, but anything. All right, wait, I got to tell, okay, maybe you could help me because here's an assumption that I have that I'm absolutely awful at it because I'm the kind of guy, it's going to say on my tombstone, although I'm not going to have it too, it's going to, on the ashes, the bottle my wife's going to have, it's going to say, no one worked harder, no one worked more, no one worked more minutes in their life. Clarity, this book is about working less and achieving more. And, I'm so silly. I think, well, what if I work more? I could achieve more. And I know that that's not true, but I love to, let's shift gears. Let's talk about that because that's actually, I wanted to lead off with this because I wanted to know this first, but let's talk about this because I just suck at this. Okay. I just,
no, I mean, everyone does. And so, there's an interesting journey I took. I mean, a number of years ago, Tim Ferriss came out with his book, The 4-Hour Work Week. And of course, I saw that and I'm like, I got to read that. That sounds really appealing to me. So I read this book and of course, I'm married with kids. I've got a mortgage. I can't pick up and live in Singapore. My business requires me to be in front of clients. I can't do it remotely. So I read it and I was like, oh man, this doesn't apply to me. And I just think it's, applying to a very small segment of the population. But there was something in that book that stuck with me, which was like, hey, just like understanding something deeply and really questioning all the little assumptions you make. So like when he was able to win some like Thai boxing tournament, I'm like, he figured it out and he just studied the rules really well. And he found some, little thing that allowed him to, take advantage of some gap in the rules. And I thought that was kind of clever, but in the back of my head, I was working on this. And so, I, was always this guy, just like you, Andy, like super working hard, but I have this superpower and the superpower is I'm super lazy. Okay. And that laziness is always like, I'm going to try and be like, as Bruce Lee said, be like water. I'm going to try and find the path of least resistance to do something, to accomplish something. And you realize that like, water always finds a path of least resistance, but water also carved out the Grand Canyon. So it's exceptionally powerful if you leverage it properly. And so, trying to figure out that key. And so I was working really hard and I was in sales, as you said earlier, and we were spinning off another business unit. And one of my business partners who probably sold, the other half of the business for our company was like, hey, I need to focus on this other business unit and you need to sell like everything now. I'm like, holy cow, I'm already like working like 1,000,000 hours a week. I was scared. I was intimidated. And so I put my shoulder into it and I worked hard just like everyone else. And, I came up with the ability to kind of like, sell the other half of the business. And, I was walking into my partner's office all proud, thinking I was going to get a pat on the back. And, I was like, congratulations, you did it. And, he says like, hey, that was good. I'm glad you did that. That was awesome. You did what we needed to do. Thank you. And I was like, okay, that was a less than what I expected. Then he goes like, hey, let me ask you a question. Can you teach other people how to do this? I was like, I just kind of know what to do. I'm not sure I could teach other people. And he said like this magic phrase, which he said all the time, is like, you're not done. And I was like, oh, crap. And so I was like, I guess I need to pay attention to what I'm doing so I can teach it to other people. And it just happened that it coincided with a part of my life where I was coaching youth sports. So my son was playing lacrosse and I was coaching youth sports teams. And I was taking these concepts like throwing and catching that how do you throw and catch? It's like, I don't know, you just do it. And I was having to break it down for kids. And so that process got me to think like, well, if I can break down that for kids to learn, I can break down sales. And so I had this journey and I spent a lot of time like digging into why did I ask that question at this time? Or why was my instinct to be like, just be silent and just wait this one out? Or why was my instinct to do X, whatever? And so I started really developing what I call conscious competence. And when you have conscious competence, you understand the why behind the how. And when you do that, you can explain it to other people. And when you can explain it and teach it, that's when your like skill level goes a level higher. And so I, just thought that I was doing the same thing, like even like coaching youth sports, everything was getting better. And I started explaining to my consultants how to be a better consultant, and they were getting better. And I was just breaking things down into their simplest components. And so I thought, conscious competence is really that thing that allowed me to do more with less, or achieve more with less work. Now, I'll tell you this, because there's another little factor that goes into this, but like I got to the point where I was doing this sales job that used to take like 60 hours a week, that then when I had to double the sales for a while, took like 80, 90, 100 hours a week. And then I got it down to miraculously 6 hours a week. I could keep the sales going for the company with 6 hours of effort. And I was like amazed. And I just cut out stuff that didn't move the needle. I was like, this really doesn't matter. This is the stuff that matters. A lot of people didn't even believe me. They're like, no, I think this is important. I'm going to keep doing it. And I'm like, go ahead, but I'm telling you, that doesn't matter. Do these other things. And, it took some people a few years to finally be like, yeah, I think you were right. And I'd be like, I'm right, because like, I'm not here in the office that much, and I'm doing a lot of other things. And what I did though, which was amazing, is I started reading psychology books. I started learning behavioral economics. I started really investing in myself, and it got even easier. I could go into meetings. I could like fix other sales calls. I could fix other things because I was like, oh no, just say this right now. And that gets to this other element that I think is really essential to really accomplishing more with less. It's thinking about time differently. Most of us know what to do. We just don't always do it in the right order. So doing things in the right order is important. Sequencing is important. Also important is timing, because if you think about like baseball, sports analogy, some people don't like that, but like the difference between a home run and a foul ball is timing. And so you can have a huge impact if you get your timing right. And so a lot of times it's like, yes, that is the right thing to do, just not yet. And so when you think about it that way, it also requires this other element of time that is important, which is patience. Saying like, hey, I know good timing because I've got conscious competence. I know the right moment to do this thing. And I have to have the patience to wait for that right moment. And then it has even greater impact. And that is, all about like sequencing, timing, and patience can take conscious competence and just like supercharge it. And that's when like you find like you've got time to invest then instead of just spending all your time doing things. And here's the thing, Andy, you kind of talk down on yourself a little bit, and I'm going to kind of, correct you because I don't think you should. There are very few people do more to figure out proper sequencing and timing about what they're doing. And very few people are more intentional and deliberate about what they do than you. You have exceptional conscious competence. What you do, though, is when you free up that time because you figured out an efficient way, you just tackle something else, and much like I decided to go research, it wasn't like I was just sitting around watching, Friends on TV. I was researching behavioral economics. I was taking, courses. I was investing in myself. I was coaching youth sports and starting sports leagues. I was doing other things. But it's just a matter of like, when you develop that conscious competence, you can do other things. And that's, liberating.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate that correction. I'll say you're right on that one because it is true. But I will. So the conscious competence, folks, that's really big. And a few analogies I want to draw here for you that Jim said that I think are absolute home runs that can apply to your job search, can apply to your career. That conscious competence is really, really important. But the other thing that he said was how it freed up time, and he spent a lot of time working on himself. And I said this, I think, last week, is that working, trying to get your skills better or do your job better is one thing. When you're spending more time investing in yourself than you are on your job, that's when things really take off, right? And you see things differently, you do things better. And the other thing is, he talked about, which I love that he said about, he had to basically engineer the steps, and whether he was sharing them with the kids or sharing them with the other salespeople. And what does that sound like? When I talk to you about interview storytelling, the second step I want you to call out and consciously call out for people is, what's the outline? What's the approach you took? Everything that you've done in your entire life needs to be reverse engineered, because as you go into an interview, you're talking about, and I'm going to do these 5 steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's the playbook. There's the reverse engineer. There's the, I can teach other people how to do this. This is, I know what I'm doing. So that's really important. What he said there has so many analogies. All right, wait, so I know we've been talking about a lot of lessons in clarity. And so I know Kara has put the link in the chat, and I've put the link in the email. Grab that book, but I would never miss an opportunity to talk to Jim about the podcast, the leadership podcast that he co-founded with Jan Rutherford a number of years back. I don't know, 400 or 500 episodes in. You can share with them kind of how long you've been doing this. But the one thing that I want y'all to know, and because I want to know from Jim, okay, he talks to a lot of really great people. I mean, I've listened to a lot of these. These are prominent people. Some are everyday people, but most of them have overcome some kind of hurdle to get to where they are. And you probably know a lot of them. Leaders have stuff in common, right? We all might route it differently. We all might come from different paths. But what do you talk about from the podcast's perspective, because you talk to so many hundreds of people? What are some of the traits that you notice they have that you can share with my audience, that these are the kind of approaches or skills or traits or whatever that you want to build in you?
Yeah, I this is such a fascinating thing. And like, yeah, I want to go back to just the podcast and something that's like, okay, people are like, oh, how do you pick, who's on the podcast or this and that? It's like people that interest me. I look at myself like, a musician. I only play the music I want to play. If you like it or not, I don't care, but this is the music I want to play. And these are the people I want to talk to. And we're fortunate now, 7 years in, 400 interviews that, we get to talk to some really cool people. And I will tell you, a number of years ago, the Air Force asked us to like, hey, can you come out and talk to us about like some leadership stuff? And like, what are some of the common themes you found with leadership? And we're like, okay, cool. That sounds like fun. It was a great honor. And immediately, like, we both came up with the same answer, Jan and I. It's like, there is one thing that across the board is universal with all these great leaders we have in common. And it is, they are curious. Because the curious person asks the question. The curious person says, I want to know why this works, not just that it worked. The curious person wants to understand, like, God, that's fascinating. What led to that? And they want to understand. And the more you understand, the more you're peeling back layers of the onion, the more you get to that conscious competence level. You really can't go and develop conscious competence if you're not curious. You're just going to like get good at something and then stop. But if you really want to understand it, if you really want to get to the meat, the heart of the matter, you've got to be curious. And so it's not something you're born with. I mean, some people are, some people aren't, but the reality is you can develop it. You just have to want to develop it, not be afraid of what you might find. Because sometimes what you find is not anything you want, but you have to just have that fearlessness that says, I'm curious. I need to know, good or bad. I need to understand this. And when you think about, let's say, your job and your job performance, I think one of the reasons why a lot of people hate performance reviews is because, it happens once a year and it's like, just seems like it's out of touch or, it's not relevant or anything like that. But, I don't care if your company does performance reviews once a year or not. If you're waiting for feedback, you're not curious. Mm-hmm. You have to seek feedback, and the curious person seeks feedback. And so anytime you're doing anything, the more feedback you get, the sharper you're going to get. Steel sharpens steel. And so if you're willing to go out there and seek feedback and say like, hey, what went wrong? I didn't get this position. Maybe call the recruiter back and just say, hey, is there, anything I need to learn? Anything I could do differently? Whatever you need to do to learn and seek feedback and be curious is going to make you better. And so if there's one universal trait that all these very successful leaders have, it's they are curious, innately curious, and they aren't afraid to ask the question regardless of what the answer is.
Well, I love that. That's, to me, you can find out a lot of answers, right? Why did that happen? Why is this occurring? But it takes a willingness to kind of intercept your automated thoughts. I say we move at the speed of our emotions, but I think that's absolutely great. Well, I know there's a ton of guests that you have. The talks are fantastic. For any of you who are interested in more on that, I know Kara dropped the Leadership Podcast link in there. You can check out his website. He's on all the platforms, and he and Jan are great, and they interview a lot of people. They also have episodes where they interview each other or they talk about topics. It's really a lot of fun. Wait, I got one more for you. Then I do want to do some Q&A. When I live my life, my folks know this. Or if you haven't heard me say this, if you're new to my community, my goal in life is every person I meet literally is better off for having met me. Okay, that's it. Mm-hmm. That's my goal. And I know you've got some lessons related to this that are kind of an underlying theme that you've carried out through your professional career, that you talk about on the Leadership Podcast, that you've assimilated into the book. I'd love to talk about that, because I think if people have some kind of marker or internal, credo or whatever you want to call it, but tell the folks a bit about, kind of what you sprinkled into the book. Like, what's the big thing that you think about?
Yeah. I think, if you were to, this isn't the big thing, but I'm going to lead up to it. Okay. No one does it alone. Okay. No one gets to where they need to go or where they want to go alone. And it takes, a lot of people to work together to try and get to where you want to be. But I think in the grand scheme of things, we all interact with other people. Andy, you interact with your tribe here. I interact with lots of people on any given day. And I always kind of modeled myself after what I viewed my mother and my father do. And I knew that like everyone that they spoke with, and people always sought their counsel in ways through the years, they would leave. I could see other people, like they leave those conversations, like feeling 1 inch taller. Okay. Just like more confident in themselves, better about their future, all kinds of other things. And I just kind of boiled down my philosophy to this simple fact that like, if you can, every interaction you have with someone, if you can say, I want them to walk a little taller. I want them to feel 1 inch taller at the end of this conversation. It's going to be productive. It's going to be helpful. It's going to help your relationship. All these things are going to help them be more successful. And if you're around someone that helps you be more successful, A, you want to be around them more. B, these are the kinds of people you drive through a wall for, because that's just a stronger, better relationship, because my needs weren't as important as your needs. And that is how you help other people feel 1 inch taller. So it's a very simple construct to just throw in your mind. It's like, hey, I'm entering into a conversation. I need to do something to help this person feel just 1 inch taller by the end of this meeting. And sometimes it's just listening and being like, you're not alone. I'm with you.
I love that.
I can't solve all your problems, but it feels like I'm better that I'm not alone. And so I just enter every conversation that way. I wasn't always good at this, and I'll be the first one to tell you, like I early in my leadership career, early in my management career, I was like, I probably made people feel smaller. And I'm not proud of that. I can go back and replay stuff at my first job and go, wow, I really got that wrong. People told me I got that wrong, and so I got the feedback and I listened to it. But I think if you have an aspiration for yourself in every interaction, whether it's with your child, whether it's with your spouse, whether it's with your boss or a coworker or superior, if you aspire to make people feel 1 inch taller, magical things will happen in your life.
It's true. I mean, it's true. If you give, you think abundantly, you want to help people. You don't have to lose for me to win, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I would rather help you. That will, I always talk about one of the best investments you can make in yourself is to invest in other people. Wait, I love that message. All right, wait. So I want to get some questions in here for you. I know Kara's been collecting them, folks. Let's give Jim so far a big round. If you're enjoying this, click the thumbs up button. You can get his book Clarity on Amazon. You can check out the Leadership Podcast, basically where any podcast is played. He's got a website too with all the episodes on it if you want to see that. And Jim, just where can people connect with you aside from the websites and those things that Kara has already put in there? I don't know, LinkedIn, your website. Where do you want them to go before we get into the questions?
LinkedIn is good, but my name's really hard to pronounce and spell, so most people don't get it right. The easiest place to go, and you can get to all the other good stuff, is like right here, businesswisdom.com. So if you go to businesswisdom.com, that will take you to my Rafti Advisors website, have links to my LinkedIn, all the other stuff that matters. But that one's easy to remember.
That is easy to remember. It's a wonderful, I love business wisdom, man. I think that's what life's all about, is every day getting 1 inch taller for yourself and educating yourself. Like you said, investing in yourself. So wait, I know we have, this is great stuff. I know we've got some questions. One of them was on the format of the book. I think somebody asked early, Esmeralda, and said, I hope Jim's book's going to be available either on CDs or through Audible. Do you know, do you have an audio? Will you be having an audio version? Do you know?
I will. I'm not going to start recording that until January. So it'll probably be out next spring is my guess, or something like that. I needed to take a little break. But I'll start recording that in January. I'm going to do it in my own voice. So, maybe that's appealing, maybe it's not. It'll be out this spring. There is not a CD version, but, there is, the Kindle version is the only electronic version right now.
Beautiful. I know how that goes too. I'm going through that right now with the publisher and the timing, all that stuff. All right, wait. So, I know we had a couple of other questions that popped in. Let me just get this here. SB, that's code for Sue. Jim, great talk. Love it. Sue, thank you on Jim's behalf. I'm sure he will thank you too. It seems time, patience, etc., is highly contingent on tolerance for uncertainty. That's an interesting view. Is that something that can be cultivated, a tolerance for uncertainty, that is? Any tips on observations from sales deals, or really any other ways that you might help her with that?
It's a great question. And it's a really insightful question too. And what I'd like to kind of throw out there is, a tolerance for uncertainty, let's just flip that on its head and call it something else, which is confidence. What's your confidence level? And so a tolerance for uncertainty is, let's say, a different mindset, which says, I am, the world happens to me. Like there's uncertainty I can't control. And we're always that way. I mean, there's a bunch of things we can't control in life. I can't go tell people what to do, but what we can do is influence the things we can control. So I can't tell you that this is like, foolproof for any situation, but you say it's really a stoic philosophy, which is, hey, don't fret the stuff you can't control, but focus on the stuff you can control and try and build your confidence by saying, listen, I am confident. Let's say if you're doing rock climbing or something like that, which I've had the good fortune to do with some really special people in the military. I can't say it's like 100% foolproof that bad things can't happen. Certain bad things can happen, but I can be smart about what I'm doing so that I reduce my risks. I can, do all kinds of things that say like the risk is pretty low and we've de-risked the situation as much as possible. And because of that, I have a high degree of confidence. And that high degree of confidence is what gives me the ability to be patient, because I believe patience is the truest form of confidence. And so I think that's why I think that question is so insightful, because like patience and confidence, they're together. I just don't see how they're not completely tied together.
Yeah, let me add to that. So all that, I agree 100%, because when you're confident, it will work out, you can be patient. What I tell people, and kind of a different way of looking at this, is the longer term you think, the better short-term decisions you make. And every single day, patience to me, the other way of looking at it is just don't quit, right? Like not quitting is a skill. And if you can make it through each day, most of the time, you're going to outlast others if it's a competitive thing, but let's not even look at it that way. If you give yourself a long enough period of time to achieve a goal, you have a much greater likelihood of being able to do that. And if you get more focused on what you're doing each day. So I always have this thing about, I like you to think, just be aware of 3 to 5 moves, but only focus on what is the next step. When you just wrote this great book, right? There's a lot of things that go into it. First thing is, what do I want to write about? You talked about you wanted to write about the one, right? Okay, good. Well, all right. There you go. Check number 1. You make an outline. Check number 2. That thing's going to change, right? You got to schedule, right? Yes, you got to find a publisher. Yes, you might have to find an agent. Yes, you might have to figure out what the cover's going to like. People do this every day. If you say, look, I'm going to give myself enough time, I'll one step, but I have confidence that I'm going to be able to do it. That to me is a big deal. But I think that's a great way that you articulated that about confidence in relation to patience. This is great stuff. We still got to top of the hour. Is there any, let's see, Mel, for those of us with ADHD, patience is almost impossible. Working on, but that's a hard one. It is. It is. Do you have any thoughts on anybody who deals with ADD or ADHD or has a difficult time focusing or concentrating?
This guy.
You do?
This
Tell
guy. I've got it all.
Tell
I mean,
us
I've got
that.
this.
How do
I've
you
got
deal
dyslexia.
with that? You take the floor. Tell me that. Tell them that. That's awesome. No, I mean, that's not awesome.
Brother.
I mean, it's awesome to share this story.
Yeah, I mean, I've got dyslexia. I've got I've got ADHD. I mean, it's just something that's embedded in me. And so, what is really interesting, and I'll just draw this parallel. I've had the good fortune, and I do a lot of volunteer work with our military veterans. And one of the things that I've had the good fortune to do is work with a lot of very special operations level veterans. And to a T, I mean, they're almost all ADHD. But then you sit there and you say, how can this person who's very ADHD do some of these things that just require tremendous focus? I mean, you look at these people and you say they've got tremendous focus. And part of it is you got to just lean harder into the ADHD. And that's what I've found. Okay. And that's what I think they do, which is like, okay, I'm distracted by stimulation, but sometimes it's just like, I'm just going to indulge it. I'm just going to go after it. Like I got at any given time, like a million different projects going on, and I'll bounce between them all, but I just keep all the plates spinning. And it seems like sometimes the more I've got going on, the more progress I make. Now, there are decisions you have to make with regard to your time that just says, listen, this is a total waste of time. And so I think the lesson to take from the military, and maybe from my success, is don't just spin a plate because you got a plate spinning. You got to understand what the objective is. So it's like, hey, the objective is we need to rescue this hostage. That is the primary objective. All my activities have to be focused on that. But I'm aware of all these other things that are going on, and that stimulates my brain, and that's good. But my objective is this. My goal is this. I've got all these reasons why, I could do other things except for write my book this morning, but my objective is write the book, focus on that. Still doesn't mean I don't have a million other things going on in my personal life and my business life, et cetera. But I think sometimes we think the medicine for ADHD is to like back off and just like focus on one thing. The reality is like, you're never going to do that. That is a completely unrealistic prescription. But if you sit there and just say, hey, like dive in a little deeper, but just know what your true objectives are so that you don't get derailed by stupid things like, squirrel, and you get distracted by something. Then I think it works. But that is really counterintuitive, and it's worked for me. And I think it works for the special operators.
Do you use any tools to manage? Like, I mean, I talk to people about all the tools I use, from a planner and all this other stuff to kind of keep in order. And the way I focus, there's other things that go into my ability to focus. I mean, I practice focusing every morning. I practice focusing throughout all the day, every day. But I use a time enter deliverable based approach to stay on task and make sure I'm completing, because my deliverables are tied to time, not the day. They're tied to the hour or the minute. Do you use any tools or tactics that you can share while we're on this line? Like, how do you, so let's say you got you got your book going, you got your business going, you got your podcast going, and you moved houses, you got a lot of things going. How do you, like, tools, like, do you use any particular tools you can share, or pad and paper, or what is it?
Total tool junkie. I've tried everything through the years. I just like, I've gone through every tool. I love evaluating new tools and stuff like that. And I'll give you two things that I think are pretty actionable that I think work for most people. Now, one of the great benefits I had of being in the consulting industry for a long time and being a consultant was that you need to do time cards, and you need to keep track of all your time so you can bill your clients. And nothing gives you greater visibility into when you're making good decisions or not than actually tracking your time. And so, and I did that for like 20 years religiously. And there's an incredible amount of feedback you're creating for yourself that allows you to really sharpen your ability to spend time in the right places. There's a guy by the name of David C. And he's got a website like David C. DAVIDSEAH.com, I believe. And he's got this little PDF you can download and print out. And I use that with clients. It's called the Emergent Task Planner. But I use it slightly different. And I'll send you a link, Andy, so you can link to this little quick reference guide I've got for people that explains how to use it. But I tell people, like, you put down your major tasks in this one section that you want to accomplish that day. And then in the left side, it's got time. It says, here's when I plan on doing that during the day. I know this is going to take 2 hours. This is going to take 30 minutes. This is going to take 15 minutes. And here's when I want to do these things. And then there's another section that's like a notes section. But what I tell people to do with that is write down everything you did that wasn't on the list. Okay. And then take that page at the end of the day, put it aside. And at the end of the week, take up your 5, 6, 7 sheets, however many you have, and just evaluate them and just look at them and just say, did I make good decisions this week? The boss asked me to, do something important, and I went over and worked on this report for the boss. I wasn't on my plan, but probably a smart decision to work on your boss's thing that he asked you to do. Got distracted by someone in purchasing who wanted me to do this, and I responded to 20 emails and I didn't get my main project done. Maybe I could have made better decisions. And so all we're trying to do is help ourselves create a better algorithm for making better decisions. Like Google yourself, turn yourself into the Google algorithm, learn how to feedback stuff. Now, that process that I developed through the years is like allows me to be much more effective and much better. And that's an investment in yourself, creating your own little Google algorithm. And then the thing I do that I enjoy the most, because I've gone through every electronic tool, every other tool, I've got these little 5x7 cards. to-do list. I buy them on Amazon, and I use them religiously. I mean, I've got them all the time. I've got stuff that are just, that's how I like to work. That's what works for me.
I do too. I'm a pen and paper guy too. I think the audit though, I call it, so for my leadership program, I taught about delegation. And one of the things that you said that reminded me, like I tell people like once a month, you should spend a couple of days and audit everything that you did, right? And not just was I efficient or not, it might've been a great exercise and you got something done, but did you need to do that? And then every morning I spend between 10 and 20 minutes doing my excellence planning. And one of the questions on my excellence planning is, what should I stop doing? Right. And you won't know unless you do what Jim just said about actually tracking it, right? You need a diary for this. Wait, I love that. Hang on. I want to sneak one more in because Elma is a boot camper of mine. She's in my job search coaching program. She's got a great question. I'd love to get your take on this. She said for younger managers aspiring to become more senior, what advice can you give to set us apart? And then she's got parenthetically learning plan, mentoring direct reports, managing stakeholders. Really, okay, younger managers to become more senior, what advice do you have for them to set themselves apart?
Yeah, this is, there's no like one answer. Okay. But pay attention to the leadership is something that like I can write down on paper and try and define it. But the reality is like, it's a feeling. It's how people make you feel. It's how, when you're experiencing good leadership and when you're experiencing bad leadership. Pay attention. Even if you want to keep a diary that says like, hey, here's the kind of activities a bad boss I had does. And like, I don't enjoy that. So I never really want to do that when I'm in that position. And then pay attention to like, wow, that really felt good. Or I really appreciated that. Or, that was good. It's like, okay, this is something I want to add into my repertoire when I become a leader. I always look at it and say, evaluate the people you admire and try and behave like them. Try and, you got to have your own style, but don't mimic them, but like say like, hey, these are behaviors I want to emulate. It's why, little kids who are watching sports athletes, say like, hey, I want to kick the ball like so-and-so, like Ronaldo. I want to, swing a bat like so-and-so. We mimic behaviors we want to adopt. And so I think that's an important part of it as well. And then let people know. Okay. Seek feedback like, hey, I admire you and I want to be in a position like you someday. I just want to let you know that, and if there's anything that I should be doing that, I'm not doing, please let me know. If there's anything I'm doing that I should continue doing and you appreciate, let me know. And if there's anything I should stop doing, please let me know. And seek the feedback and let people know that you're open to it. And I think you'll be surprised how helpful people are in the business world to say like, hey, just having someone tell you like, I'm interested. I really want to do that. Not saying I'm ready. Don't issue commands or orders like I'm ready. Yeah. Like, why am I not a leader now? It's like, what do I need to do? And I think you'll be surprised how helpful people are.
Yeah. I always say to people that I coach, here's your acid test. So Elma, this is for you and everybody else. And Jim's absolutely right about observation, expression, and modeling. But if you want an acid test, leadership is defined as people follow you when they have a choice not to follow you. Because if people follow you because they have to follow you, that's not called leadership, that's called power. Okay? So you can audit your behavior. And by the way, you don't need to be the top person on the org chart. Are you the person on the team that is influential and can get those ideas in and people want to do them? They could choose not to do them. That's, to me, the acid test. Well, we got a great leader with us today, Jim Vaselopulos. I hope you follow him. I hope you connect with him. Check out the Business Wisdom website that Kara dropped in there, the Leadership Podcast, Clarity, the book. I told you, I got to pre-read all that stuff, and it's absolutely fabulous, and I can't wait for him to mail me my signed copy. I have the ebook.
You're going to. I'm waiting for the hardcover to come out, brother.
All right, and give us all a thumbs up. Share this. This is going to stay up on my YouTube channel. I'm sure when we're done, Kara's going to make like 80 videos out of this that you'll be circulating all over the place. You'll see Jim's face and my face. I hope you got a lot out of it. Thanks for coming to my special live office hours this week. And for anybody who's still here with us, next week on Monday, we start the Job Search Challenge. I'm here every day. I'm live 8 out of 9 days in a row. So I hope you can make every minute of it. Jim, thanks for this. I'll be in touch with you soon to do a little kumbaya later. I appreciate you, man. I hope all of you guys enjoyed this. I'll see you all next week.
Thank you all.
Appreciate you.